Today, we're jumping into one of the strangest and, honestly, most fascinating campaigns in all of military history. We're talking about a war where the biggest victory was won just by showing up. This is the incredible story of the Expedition of Tabuk.
So here's the puzzle, and it sounds kind of impossible, right? How can a brand new state, one that just got its act together, look the mightiest empire on Earth in the eye and win, without a single sword being drawn? Okay, let's break down exactly how this happened.
To really get this, we've got to rewind the clock to the 9th year of the Hijra. So, for the first time, the Arabian Peninsula is united under one banner. But, when you become the new power player on the block, you start attracting some, let's call it, unwanted attention from the neighborhood superpower. I mean, you really can't overstate the power imbalance here. On one side, you've got this new Muslim state in Arabia, mostly recently unified tribes. And on the other, you've got the Roman Empire, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, fresh off a victory against the Persians. It was the ultimate David versus Goliath situation, and you can bet Rome was not thrilled about this new force popping up on its southern border.
And then the news hits Medina, and it spreads like wildfire. Whispers turn into panic conversations. A massive Roman army, somewhere between 40,000 and a staggering 100,000 soldiers, is on the march, and their goal, to crush this new state before it gets any bigger. The threat felt very, very real.
So what do? Well, the Prophet Muhammad made a pretty historic call. He announced a preemptive campaign to go meet the Romans head-on. But this call to arms, man, it was going to be the community's biggest test of sacrifice and commitment yet.
An army of 30,000 men was put together. Let that sink in. This was, by a huge margin, the largest military force Arabian history had ever seen. This mobilization alone sent a clear message to everyone. This isn't just another border skirmish. This is for survival.
But look, having 30,000 soldiers is one thing. Actually equipping and feeding them is a whole different ballgame. And the call for donations came at literally the worst possible time. We're talking about the peak of a brutal Arabian summer, right in the middle of a major famine. Nobody had anything to spare.
And yet, the response was just incredible. Omar shows up with half of everything he owned. Then comes Abu Bakr, who brings his entire fortune, literally everything, leaving nothing for his family but his faith in God. And then there was Uthman. His donation was so massive, it would end up equipping a huge chunk of the army all by itself.
Just to put Uthman's donation into perspective for you, he provides 900 camels. These things were the lifeblood of any desert army, absolutely critical for carrying supplies and water. Then he adds 100 war horses to the mix, basically the battle tanks of the 7th century. They were vital for cavalry and scouting.
And if that wasn't enough, he tops it all off with 1,000 gold dinars, in cash, a massive fortune. The point is, from the very top down, the community was all in.
But, it wasn't just about the wealthy. For me, the whole spirit of this moment is captured in the story of one of the poorest men in the city. He worked all night long just to earn a small handful of dates, and he brought that handful and gave all of it. Every single contribution mattered.
So the army is funded, they're assembled. But now comes the real test. A 700-kilometer march north, straight into enemy territory, through some of the most brutal conditions you can imagine. This journey would go down in history as the March of the Army of Hardship.
This 15-day trek was just grueling. The sun was relentless. After just a few days, the food started running out. A few days after that, the water was gone. It got so bad they had to start sacrificing their precious camels just to drink the water stored in their humps. It was a test of pure, raw endurance.
Try to picture this for a second. Even with all those donations, things were stretched so incredibly thin that for every 18 soldiers, there was only one camel. They took turns riding, which means most of the army walked the entire 700 kilometers in the desert heat.
And if you want one story that just perfectly captures the resolve of this army, it's the story of Abu Dar al-Ghifari. His camel, at one point, just collapsed from exhaustion. Did he turn back? Nope. He just put his stuff on his own back and kept walking, all alone, until he finally caught up with the rest of the army. The commitment was just on another level. So, after 15 days with unimaginable hardship, the Muslim army finally reaches Tabuk, deep in Roman territory. This is it, the moment of truth. They're exhausted, they're battered, but they are ready to face down the world's greatest military machine.
So they draw up their lines. They brace for the fight of their lives. There's just one tiny little problem. There's no one there. The battlefield is completely empty. The Roman superpower is a total no-show. So where were they?
Well, historians basically have two main theories. Theory 1, the Romans got word of this unbelievably large and stubborn army marching their way, an army that just wouldn't quit, and they decided to pack it in rather than risk a fight. Theory 2, the whole thing was just a rumor that got completely blown out of proportion. But honestly, the reason almost doesn't matter as much as the result.
Because this non-event, this anticlimactic arrival on an empty battlefield, it would end up completely redrawing the political map of the whole region. This is where the real strategic victory happens.
The fallout was immediate, and it was huge. First, just by marching 700 kilometers and calling the Romans out, the Muslims announced themselves on the world stage. They were a power to be reckoned with. Second, all the local tribes who used to be allied with Rome, they saw which way the wind was blowing and quickly switched their allegiance to Medina. Third, this pushed the borders of the Muslim state right up against the Roman and Persian empires. The whole map changed. And finally, this massive show of strength and unity convinced the last of the independent Arab tribes to join the community, completing the unification of the entire peninsula.
And they didn't just turn around and leave. The army stayed at Tabuk for 20 days, making new treaties and cementing all these new alliances. When they finally marched back to Medina, they didn't return as survivors. They returned as victors who had achieved every single objective of a war without losing a single person in battle.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question. The expedition of Tabuk shows that sometimes real power isn't about winning fights. It's about showing the unity, the will, and the resolve to see it through, no matter the cost. So, what does it really mean when your victory is so total, so absolute, that the battle itself never even has to happen?